first question right off the bat. Did Alex Pretti have a right to bring a gun to the protest?
Oh, absolutely. So let's start with the Second Amendment. As interpreted by the Supreme Court in recent years, the Second Amendment ensures a right, particularly for someone who has a license to concealed carry, to carry that weapon with them in public spaces wherever they go. The fact that there was a protest going on, or had it been a prayer vigil or a sports rally or any other event, makes no difference whatsoever. The right is to possess a gun subject to licensing requirements, which were satisfied in this case, when proceeding in public. And there's nothing about the situation here, contrary to the statements by Kash Patel and Bovino, by the way, is simply false. Can we redo that? It, Kash Patel, the director of the FBI, and Mr. Bovino, the head of CBP, have said that there is no right to carry a weapon under the Second Amendment if you're in an area in which, well, it's not clear what they're saying, but they've used phrases like protest or active crime scene or a place where there will be disturbance. Those are all simply wrong. The right is not limited in that way. It's simply a right to carry a weapon when in public.
Okay, so a lot of people are, from what we're seeing online anyway, there's a lot of comparing and contrasting to the Kyle Rittenhouse situation. How does this, if at all, compare to that?
There's sort of no connection. Both were carrying weapons, of course, but Kyle Rittenhouse actually shot people. As far from the video evidence, it's quite clear Pretti never drew his weapon at all, or even reached for it. In fact, it had been removed from him, and an agent was jogging actually, away from the scene of confrontation, holding the weapon at the time the shooting occurred. There is some thought that the gun that the agent was carrying that was taken from Pretti might have gone off accidentally. It's a Sig Sauer pistol, which is notorious for accidental discharges. At least that claim is made in a lot of lawsuits. And maybe that was the event that caused the other agents to open fire. But there's no indication. The video is absolutely clear that Pretti did not reach for the gun, use the gun, attack anyone with the gun, or in any way do anything with the pistol other than simply have it in a holster.
Are there any similarities outside of the end result? Are there any similarities between those two as far as, so they both had a weapon with them? One of them was concealed carry, the other one was open carry. Is there any differences or similarities between those two?
Well, I mean, from a Second Amendment perspective, not really. So certainly the Second Amendment is subject to limitations by reasonable regulation, but in both cases, the relevant statutes were not being violated. And there are huge differences in other ways. Pretti was wearing a gun. There's no indication he had any intention of using it. There's no intention that he brought it to the protest for the purpose of using it. Right, Rittenhouse crossed state lines with an assault rifle with his explicit purpose of having it ready to use in case he decided he wanted to, and then did so. I find the cases wildly incomparable in other ways, but as far as the Second Amendment is concerned, no, there's no real distinction between the two at all.
If you have a concealed carry, as Pretti did, do you have to let officers know that you have a concealed carry on you? No.
No, I mean, it's certainly wise to do so, as a matter of prudence, but there is no affirmative require of preemptive disclosure that you're carrying a weapon that you're legally entitled to carry.
What constitutional protections apply when someone does bring a firearm to a protest? We're talking about First Amendment and Second Amendment at the same time there.
All of them. So now I'll just go by what I've seen on the videotape, and I don't think there's any disagreement about this. Mr. Pretti's rights from the First Amendment, Fourth Amendment, Second Amendment, and Fifth Amendment were all violated. He has a right to engage in free speech and expression, and that right is not altered by the fact that he simultaneously exercised a Second Amendment right. I've already discussed the Second Amendment right. The video is clear that he did not assault or impede federal officers. They came at him. And so he did not waive any of the rights that he otherwise would have had. The detention of Pretti, the officers grabbing him and taking him to the ground, was unlawful under the Fourth Amendment, at least based on the video. There's nothing to indicate that there was probable cause to believe he had been committing a criminal act of any kind. And the Fifth Amendment prevents people's lives and property, but lives being taken away without due process of law. This shooting, whether or not it rises to the level of a murder, certainly looks to be a shooting carried out by law enforcement without adequate cause. and therefore without due process of law as that concept has been interpreted by the courts.
Another thing we're hearing is Pretti potentially didn't have a permit with you that I don't know if is confirmed, but is, besides that, do you need to have the permit with you if you are a concealed carry holder?
That'd be a matter of Minnesota law, and I'm not an expert on that topic. I will say that that does nothing to alter the constitutional rights analysis in the case. And let's be clear: it is not the case that federal officers said, "Do you have a gun? Let me see the permit." None of this was part of the events that occurred. Um, but the specific question you're asking, was he required to have the permit with him? I have no idea. That's a question of state law.
Would you say that ICE violated Pretti's rights?
Oh, I don't think there's any question. Exactly how many rights and in what ways, is open to question. So, for example, there is an exception to the due process clause that I mentioned for officers who act legitimately in self-defense, and there is recent Supreme Court precedent on the question of, what are exigent circumstances sufficient to justify law enforcement officers using deadly force. The recent precedent says it's not just the moment of the shooting, did you feel afraid? That's not the only question we ask. We ask about the circumstances leading up to the shooting. In this case, the circumstances leading up to the shooting involve federal officers going out of their way to aggressively attack protesters who were retreating from them, then aggressively tackling and restraining Mr. Pretti when he was not in any way interfering with them or attacking them, and taking him to the ground. And then finding themselves in a situation in which they engage in the use of deadly force. Under the current precedent, I don't think there's any question that, again, whether or not this action arises to the level of murder, I don't think there's any question that under existing precedent, this is an unlawful shooting by these law enforcement agents, and they violated, as I mentioned before, his rights under the First Amendment, Second, Fourth, and Fifth Amendments.
Did it appear he violated any laws?
Not that I can see from the video. Now, the one thing I don't know, and no one knows, is what was he saying while he was pinned down. And it is possible to say something to a police officer that's so provocative that it violates a law against using what are called fighting words. None of that would alter the rest of this analysis. And nothing that I've seen in the video indicates that Pretti was violating any laws in any way, nor has the claim, well, I shouldn't say that. Kristi Noem claimed he tried to assassinate officers, but that's simply preposterous. I'm not aware of any assertion that Mr. Pretti violated any laws that's been made in any kind of serious way.
Anything else you want to add that I didn't ask about with this?
Only that this is, not a unique event. This is part of a pattern. Aside from the two shootings recently in Minnesota, there are more than 2,300 cases in which federal judges have found that CBP officers and ICE officers have detained people illegally. There's widespread use of non-lethal weapons like tear gas and pepper gas and rubber bullets and similar things. There have been more than 30 deaths in custody in the past year. This is a law enforcement entity that has established a widespread pattern of brutality and illegality across the board. So this incident is not a rogue event, a rogue officer or an outlier event. This is the culmination of a pattern we've seen building for some time. My pleasure. Oh, I've got not for the interview, but I have a factoid for you. Whether you're welcome to use it in the interview. I'll say it on record in case you want to use it. A recent study has shown, in fact, that immigration enforcement officers per capita commit more criminal offenses than do undocumented aliens.
Do you think Alex Pretti should have been able to bring a gun to the protest?
As a Second Amendment organization, we believe that the right to keep and bear arms is a fundamental right. So for people who are engaging in peaceful protests, we think that everyone should have that right and be able to exercise that right.
Do you think his rights were infringed upon with the results, or what's kind of your take on this?
When two fundamental rights come into conflict, like the right to keep and bear arms coming in conflict with the officer's perception that they needed to protect their life, the amount of time to sort out where those two rights come into conflict isn't best had in the middle of a street. You would want that to happen in a courtroom where everybody could be deliberative. So it's going to take some time for the investigation to pan out. But that's really not going to be of any consolation to Mr. Pretti or his family, because that decision happened in a split second, and there isn't any coming back from what happened.
Does it concern you that someone like Pretti, who had a gun, and you obviously are a gun owner yourself, does it concern you that someone with a gun like that was killed in this sort of situation?
Of course, uh, nobody wants to see someone get killed in any violent situation.
And does it bring any sort of concern for gun owners in general, about bringing weapons out in the public? I think it kind of brings that into question a little bit.
Everyone who exercises their Second Amendment rights needs to use uh, good discretion and try to avoid situations where they could end up in a violent confrontation with law enforcement.
What are kind of your thoughts when you hear people say that Pretti should not have brought a gun to this protest? What's kind of your initial reaction when you hear that?
As an organization that supports the Second Amendment, we do not discourage someone like Pretti from lawfully concealed carrying in any situation. Uh, the manner in which the situation with Pretti evolved and ended, uh, those facts are yet to be known and will come out in the investigation.
Do you think that this situation is comparable in any way to the? There's a lot of talk regarding the Kyle Rittenhouse situation. Do you think that those two are similar in any ways when it comes to the Second Amendment, or?
Not really. The Rittenhouse situation didn't involve law enforcement. Kyle Rittenhouse was using his firearm for self-defense. So I don't think that that's a good comparison.
Does this? Would you say this whole situation regarding Pretti, does this highlight the importance of the Second Amendment? Would you say, or?
I don't know if it really speaks to it. The unique situation and the unique circumstance. It's very complicated and convoluted, and every situation like this would be different in every instance.
Any message you would want to have to gun owners of Wisconsin and the country?
I don't feel comfortable adding any extra complications to this situation. It's very tragic.
Anything else you want to add that I didn't ask?
No, I think we touched on the points that we talked about, the points that we thought were valid for you.